Hi, everyone. This is Servane from Conscious Innovation. And at the moment, we're developing a project called the House of Trust. And it's aimed at people who love to invest in social change. People, through that project, will be able to explore what trust looks like. What is it when you don't have trust? How to build it, and what changes for us when trust is present in our lives. So when we have trust, we know that we can think better, design better strategies, build better practices, and grow authentic connections and amplify our impact. With this in mind, I am thrilled to welcome Juliana Rodriguez. Hi, Juliana.
Hi, Servane. So good to be with you and to all of you.
Thanks for being on this podcast. And I just wanted, before we dive into that topic, I just wanted you to share with us what you're doing in the world and what are you exploring at the moment?
Yeah. So thank you again for inviting me. It's an honor, and I think that it's a privilege to be able to talk about it. I really value those experiences because I believe that sharing ideas, sharing thoughts, and being able to talk about things, we go deeper into the changes that we want to see in the world. So I'm Juliana Rodrigues. I'm originally from Brazil. I am a researcher and educator in topics related to social innovation and social impact. Mm-hmm. And I'm now just like, I think my career was just like in two phases. The first phase was in communications, in organizations, and then I discovered my passion for education. And then for 9 years now, I did a shift in my career, and I focus on social innovation and impacts. And when I did my Master of Science, and then I start teaching and researching topics related to the ecosystem in Brazil, but also in other collaborations with other regions in the world. And now I'm just like doing my doctorate program, researching social innovation and its connections with ideas for sustainability transitions and sustainable development. And my DH, I'm based now in Finland, but my research is also connected to Brazil. So yeah, so for us to keep exploring those ideas and the changes that we need to see in the world.
So I'm hearing that you are between different countries and certainly cultures, and there might be some. I hope you don't get lost in translation.
Yeah. So yeah, this, and I think for me has been a very interesting experience in living in Finland, because I'm seeing the winter for the first time in life. So yes, also not only cultural but also the weather. Just like learning a lot and seeing how snow is beautiful, for example. Just like it's good to learn these small things in daily life as well. It's not small because the snow it's too heavy snow, but yeah, you know what I mean.
Yes, it's so funny you should say that, because one of the things that is very important when we exchange with people is that understanding that someone's context might be totally different from yours. And therefore, their understanding what you say, what you mean, will probably might not be what you think they understand. So this can lead to a lot of loss in translation. So I recently heard you on a webinar, which was talking about trust, and that's why I lent in here. And there was something very intriguing about a catalytic thought that you had around your approach to teaching, looking at trust and how trust was, how you could make trust more present in a room. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yes, and yeah, I'm glad that I'm able to. I have the opportunity to keep thinking about this, because first it was I think a conversation that I have had with a previous student of mine. Who invited me to talk about trust in the classroom, and Kayla. I was happy when she invited me, because I've never thought about trust very straightforward in the teaching setting before she talked, and she asked me to think about it. And it's interesting because I think trust is always part of any relationship. And also in the teaching setting, and also in the social ecosystems and any relationship that we want to make. but it's not something that you aim for. And so this was part of my thought, is that when I was thinking about, for example, when we're talking about education or any learning experience in a learning community, people are going to, I don't believe that we learn from the outside. I think we learn from the inside. We learn from what we have and the exchange that we have with the world and the exchange with the others. So this has a very important component of being open to share your ideas, but also to listen to others. Mm-hmm. And the basis for that is going to be trust. But it's not something that is say, okay, I'm now stopping this environment or starting this environment, and trust will be something that is a component. It's something that you aim for, but you cannot, it's part of the process. So I think it depends very much on how people are going to behave. And it was interesting because when I was talking to her, we were starting thinking about, do you aim to build trust, or do you in any relationship trust the others and work to be trustworthy for people to trust in you? And then thinking about this two-way, or when you're talking about a big group, this group. So I think it's very, very interesting. And I still, trust is not the topic of my research. It's very much part of my teaching approach, and also how I think that in any process that we are seeking to understand more things, we need to include more voices and to have this multiplicity of voices. And for that, we need trust to have a transparency and to be able to gather all those informations. But yeah, I believe it's very much part of the process. And I'm still intrigued with this, that you have to have this in mind and to have this as a goal, but it's very, very hard to have as a straightforward goal, because I think it's very much each one's choice for the ones who are in the room on that conversation to have that environment as an environment of trust.
Wow. Yeah. So I'm hearing it can be a destination, can be a journey, it's certainly a choice, and then an environment. Wow. Mm-hmm. That makes it very, very simple for us, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So what else comes into play? And especially when you, for instance, you decide to trust others, maybe unconsciously, how does that play a role when you want to learn from each other, when you want to exchange things with perfect strangers, for instance?
Yeah, I don't know if I have the answer for that, because I think it's especially because we are living now in a world that is very much marked for many polarities and many conflicts. Mm-hmm. So I think we have to put this step to trust others and to build environments of trust. So, for example, when we are discussing this podcast that you mentioned that triggered our conversation today, we were talking about how to build trust inside the classroom, or how to build trust in teaching and education settings. And we were talking about a very specific experience that we had with this previous students that I was teaching as a traveling professor for an international program, moving from the US to Uganda, to India, and to Brazil. And we were the same group traveling for those settings. So we had just like different components of trust and in this environment. First, the group, to form the group as a learning community, not only of the students, but also with the staff and the people that they interacted with. But also we were talking about trust in the environments and the places that we were going. So, and why I'm bringing this example to answer your question, because I think there we had a clear idea of why we were in this group, in that community, expanding not only the professors and the students, but also the other components of the learning community, the host families, the social entrepreneurs that we were interacting with. And we had the clear goal and a clear idea that we were there to exchange, and then talking about exchange and how to build relationships. How this was just like we were trying to learn more about the different social innovations and solutions to tackle social and environmental problems that we face today. But these in different cultural settings, not taking for granted that one thing that will work in São Paulo will work in the same way in Delhi, or something that works in San Francisco is going to work in other places. Mm-hmm. So having this, and it's like I'm thinking out loud with you, because I think trust as is not my topic of research, but I think it's part of what I do, and I think a part of what we do, because we are working with people, is an important component to build trust. Mm-hmm. And then I think also, if you believe that environment and these shared goals are there and everybody's connected to that, then everyone has to make the choice. And to make the choice, we have to talk about it. I'm losing this word in English to say, but you know, when you take a little bit out your defenses and say, okay, I'm going to be more vulnerable here, to say what I think and to listen what other things, but trying to respect. But you have to have moments to talk about it, because I think, and then coming back into my previous comment, we are living in a world marked by conflict. So if we don't dedicate time to talk, okay, here is a space for trust, here is a space that we don't have all the answers, especially because we really don't have all the answers for the things. We have many questions to explore together. Then I think these are some of the steps. And I'm just like really fascinated by people, for example, who work with conflict resolution, because then they have a different setting and different basis to talk about it. But I do believe that and now thinking out loud with you, I think that having a clear shared goal, and then this shared goal also comes with a shared basic understanding of what is the problem or what is the situation, the context that we're working from, and dedicating time to establish as the baseline that we are going to share in respectful ways and try to learn with each other. So I can just like bring my experience as an educator. I think those are two components very important that we cannot dismiss the importance of those steps.
Fantastic.
Does this make sense?
Yes. And so nice to extract some components as you just shared. I heard making the space where you know that there is going to be the opportunity to be vulnerable, or maybe transparent and more open than usual. And that, you know, you might not be interrupted when you can share your views or your ideas or your insights with other people who might not necessarily come from the same background and will have a different concept. And there's that notion of equality, of welcoming difference in that space and in that time that you take to think together. And that there is an incredible warmth there that's coming up when I'm hearing you talking, because we're these quite pragmatic component of what can be trust as an outcome, but also as a journey and as a choice. Thank you for that. So I have, in the limited time that we have together, I just want to ask you, in relation to the previous things you said, but what is our responsibility for being trustworthy? And you can maybe expand in, you know, think about the social impact ecosystem when you think about that. What is our responsibility for being trustworthy or for developing trustworthiness?
Yeah, I really value those opportunities that we have to talk, because those questions make us think more about it. And I think that as you're saying, just like one of the components is making the space and also giving time for those reflections. And I think that idea of being trustworthy was really triggered by Kayla's question, just like when we say, how is your approach to build trust? And I think, I don't know if we can build trust, but you can just like show that that is a space, or you are someone that can be trusted. And for that, I think and thinking about the social impact ecosystems, as you were saying, I kept thinking about, I'm a researcher on social entrepreneurship and social innovation. And also during the programs that I taught on entrepreneurship, we have this thing, this topic that is very important, that many times when we are thinking about a solution, we start thinking about the solutions without really thinking about the problem. Mm-hmm. And for example, when we are talking about social impact business or social innovation, there is a problem, there's intentionality of solving that problem, but we have to understand more the problem before we think about the solutions. Mm-hmm. Because many times we have this, like this saying of the solution seeking for a problem. Mm-hmm. And when you made that question, I connected with this idea that is being interested in learning more about the other, or learning more about the problem and learning more about the situation, more than imposing some solution or coming with some attitudes that I already know the answers. Or when you're talking about, for example, social entrepreneurship, there is this discussion about when we are saying about this view of the grassroots solutions, but also how can other organizations support some context with social challenges, with social problems or environmental problems. And then for me, it comes back with this attitude of trying to build things together. Mm-hmm. So when we're talking about this, what can you do to be trustworthy? I don't know, because I think that it changes very much from situation to situation. So for example, when I was in my education role, what I can do is just, for example, from the beginning, establish what are going to be the expectations for that class, and really be there to not impose my ideas, but to facilitate learning and to listen to different ideas. And then when we come to the eventual definitive role of grading, we have just like a very established way to do that. And then when I think about social entrepreneurs and in many settings trying to build solutions, how can you really listen to others and establish that idea that one doesn't come with the solution, the other doesn't come with the problems, but we are here building this together. Also, this could be for I researched also a bit impact investing. When we're talking about this relationship from investors and also the entrepreneurs, how can both learn with each other, not thinking that the way of doing things in a very professional, and when I did say this professional business-like way is the only way possible, but also how can be more empathetic with the challenge of the entrepreneurs. So I think it's this, we could go to the active listening, but I think it's not only active listening, it's this attitude that we have very complex problems and we need to listen everybody, to involve everybody, to try to, and I think it's hard also to say about the solution, just like we do go some step forward to change things for the better if we can. I think I hope this made sense. Yes. I think is this attitude of involving and engaging everyone and seeing that we have all to share and to learn together.
It sounds like there is certainly one of the components is also then added up to the others is like willingness to be present and to discover more about the other, all the circumstances that trigger change or negative change or positive change. So there's that willingness to remove assumptions as well, our assumptions, other people's assumptions, and to really stay almost naked in front of the story and not making it before it has to actually be heard. It's interesting what you bring up to it. So we've got a lot to unpack there. And thank you so much for contributing to the house of trust in a little salon, in a discussion salon. And I hope we hear from you very soon, and the state of your research, and we'll be listening and discovering with you what you're coming up with very soon. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Servane, and I hope we continue those conversations. Thank you for the questions that actually help us to really keep reflecting. So
thank you so much.